If you love me, and I know you do, please like and subscribe. Welcome to Normal Guy Games, and we have another book review. So this time I'm looking at a game called Verrotwood. And this is as you can see, a folk horror skirmish game. Now, I'm a big fan of horror games and things like that. So when I saw this, I was quite interested. It's a very simple, kind of a lightweight, miniature agnostic skirmish game. Now, I've talked with the creator, and there are a few things he wanted me to mention. His current plan is to offer free expansions for at least a year, and that includes more encounters, solo encounters, and some extras. And so there's more coming. He wants to support the community and build it, and honestly, I can't think of a better way to do that than to offer free content, to tell you the truth. I mean, that's probably the best way to do it. So, as you can see here, venture into the Verrotwood, a folk horror skirmish game. Verrotwood is an easy-to-learn skirmish game set in a dark world of pagan cults and twisted rituals. The rules have been designed with a focus on creating your own dark narrative. I'm sold. Honestly. That just that tagline, I like it. I like it a lot. So the lore is not long-winded at all. The author gets to the point very quickly, and for an easy-to-learn light skirmish game, I kind of find that to be a key thing. Like, you don't want to overwhelm with the lore. So all you're going to need to play is D10s, because the game uses D10s in a dice pool fashion, a measurement tool, some forest terrain, you want it to be dense apparently, and a 3x3 playing surface. So that's simple enough for those of us who game. And as I said, the lore, and even with the lore being very succinct, it's very rich as well. I like the way that he has laid out things here. So the backdrop is there existed a godlike being named Vehr-rot-wood. He existed alone with his trees, and eventually he created his own children. But when humankind came along, he became enamored of them. He liked them more than his children. So, using man, he created his quote-unquote final child named Ethos. His existing children grew bitter and jealous at the humans, so unable to control them, Vehr-rot-wood sent Ethos to take care of them. And apparently Ethos died in the battle with his oldest sister, Verona. So then apparently Vehr-rot-wood decided to take the race of man and in as his children and vowed to protect them. So here's where the story begins. The beginning of the end. So apparently 1 year ago, bells rang across the sky, and the skies darkened, and basically life withered away from the land. So per the lore, there's a lot of speculation from Vehr-rot-wood dying to abandoning them. The survivors basically turn to darker things that are in the forest in hopes of salvation. So this is kind of like an apocalypse type scenario, is set in this fantasy sort of setting here. So the system is very simple. You use a D10 for everything, and your model stats form your dice pool. So any environmental bonuses or anything else that you get, any other bonuses are added in there. And basically there's no limit to the dice pool, so you can keep growing as long as you have more equipment and or better stats or whatnot. What you're looking for when you roll the dice is going to be the highest result. And as you can see here in the example, say for instance Model A has a strength stat of 1, and he's attacking Model B, who has a defense stat of 2, right? You roll 1d10 for Model A, 2d10s for Model B, and whoever gets the highest roll wins. And that's easy enough to remember. I mean, you don't get any more simple than that. It's basically whoever has the highest is the one who wins the contest. You also get ritual points. So before each game, The way that I prefer is the roll method to add kind of a little bit of randomness to everything. So what you would do is each cult has a preferred stat, and that would be among your strength, dexterity, intelligence, or defense. And your basically your deity, you revere them using whatever stat that is. So if, for instance, defense is your preferred stat, you roll up your defense for each cultist, and whatever you take the highest number, and then you add them all up, and that's your ritual points. I kind of feel like that adds a lot of randomness to the game, and I prefer to have a little bit of random in there. So the turn sequence is just as simple. It's broken up into rounds, and during each round, every model gets to activate, and every activation, they get 2 points worth of actions. And you can see here on this little table, here are the actions that you can take, from moving to running, melee attack, ranged attack, praying, or enacting a ritual. So basically, I mean, you can do several things. Like you could move, attack, you could attack, you could pray, you could move and then ritual and then move. I mean, it's really, really simple. It's not hard to comprehend at all. And again, this is a point in the positive, because I've seen a lot of games where things get really complicated really fast, and it kind of sucks the fun out of it sometimes if things get too complicated. So everything that you do is just as simple as the actions themselves, right? So you have your stats here for your run actions. Your run value is 1.5 times your normal move, right? Every model can move 6 inches unless otherwise stated, right? And then there's rules for climbing, right? There's rules for falling prone. There's your melee actions, your ranged actions, and again, this is just as simple as, for a melee attack, rolling the strength value versus the defense value of 2 models, and the model that gets the highest number wins, right? And then ranged attack would be dexterity versus defense. The one with the highest roll wins. So you are going to get rituals, and rituals cost points, and I'll kind of glaze over that. I'm not going to go over every single detail in here, but you also have the pray action, which you can use to add ritual points, which I think is kind of interesting. This is a very interesting mechanic, to be able to add ritual points mid-game, right? If you're in an encounter, and you can basically hole up and sit in the back and just pray for more ritual points and wait for your opponent to come to you, or pull a guy back, pray, do whatever. It's kind of neat. So your cults, right? So the first thing you want to do is you want to create your deity. And for a game like this, at least in my eyes, I think that you would want to give your deity a very kind of a thematic name, because I don't know what self-respecting cultist would worship something like Fluffle McFloof Pants or something like that. You want something dark and sinister, like Beldria, the Obsidian Lady. I'd worship that. So once you pick your deity, you pick the stat that they are basically that your deity is based off of. What stat do you revere? And for instance, if I were to make a cult devoted to the Obsidian Lady, I would say probably defense, or maybe strength. Either one of those two. And that's it. You're done creating your deity. So you get favor, and favor is basically your currency. Favor is what you use to pay for everything, from increasing your cultist stats, to buying equipment, to buying weapons. All of that it costs favor. So when you first start, you get 300 favor, and that favor can be used on your cultist. Once you create them, your cultists all start with 1 in all of their stats. That's strength, dex, and defense, and a health value of 10. Now you start with 4 cultists, and there can be there is some wording in here that is a little confusing at first. It says your cult may never exceed 4 cultists at a time, but really what that means is you can only have 4 active cultists at any time. So you'll never be able to have more than 4 cultists on the board when you're running an encounter, is basically how that works out. Because you can have cultists in your reserves, and if you want, you can spend favor on them as well to increase their stats, because it clearly states here in this section for increasing stats. So it costs 50 favor to increase any of your stats by 1, and no stat can ever go above 5. Plain and simple, easy enough. Health, 75 to increase to a value of 5, no higher than 25. So after that, this is where we get into the equipment. Now, I'm not going to go over every single thing here because obviously you need to buy the book. But I mean, one thing I thought was kind of neat was the mount section here, right? So if I were to have a cult with that revered, the Obsidian Lady in defense or whatnot, I would think that I would probably spend and splurge to get 1 mount. You can only ever have 1 mount in your cult, but it adds an extra die to your defense, and it also adds an extra die to your strength. So for 100 favor, that's kind of a good deal. But of course, if it dies, then if your cultist dies, then you lose your mount. So that's the kind of a thing. So your weapons, again, are pretty simple. Each weapon has its own little values from your cost, right? You got your names here. You got the type of weapon it is, melee or ranged. You got the ranges. You got the damage it does, and the crit value. And when you crit is basically when you roll a 10 on 1 or more of your dice, and sometimes something else happens, right? So for example, if you have a heavy blunted instrument, it knocks your opponent prone. A light blunted, prone. And for most everything else, it's just +1 damage. So that's pretty simple, but it's also kind of cool. I like the flavor of having blunt weapons that can knock people down. That's kind of cool. So your rituals. So when you pick, basically you start off with 4 rituals, and you basically, from what it says here, you let your deity guide your decision. You pick the 4 that represent your god the most, which is kind of neat. You tailor it basically with the flavor of your cult. Each ritual has a point cost, and the more expensive ones, obviously you won't be able to do those very often. So it ranges from ones that are 0 ritual points to like cannibalism, right? And that gains you 50 favor after a battle if you take a model out of action. Very cool. Very thematic also. I like that. But there are quite a few rituals, plenty of rituals for you to pick from that all have their own sort of flavor and their own sort of for instance, here is where your int comes in, right? There's a ritual here called Existential Dread that basically puts the fear of the gods in your opponent. They make an int stat roll against any enemy model's int roll, and if the result's higher, then basically they take 5 damage to their health. Very cool, right? So that's where your int stat comes in. So basically, you can be a folk horror wizard casting your fear magic missile, I guess is what I would equate that to. One thing I have to say, though, also, if you have a look at this art, right, I know this is pictures of minis, but I think it's really, really cool. I like how everything is very thematic, and I like how the various pictures have people's, examples of painted miniatures and whatnot in there. I really like that a lot. So let's just kind of skim past all of the rituals here. and get down a little further past everything till we get to the terrain section, right? So this just covers the basics of your terrain, and it gives you examples of how much terrain you should have. It gives you simple terrains, special terrain, which has some sort of effect in the game. So, for instance, forest area, when a model is fully within the area of terrain, it gains a D10 to its defense pool when defending against ranged attacks, which is kind of neat, right? You basically have cover. Easy enough. But the different types of terrain are covered in here, and you can pretty much use just about anything with a game like this. Now, your creatures, it goes over deploying your creatures, it goes over activations, it goes over the targeting, random directions, and what I like is the rule of cruel, right? Whenever a rule isn't clear or players can't agree on something, pick whatever option will cause the most damage or chaos. I like that. So it gives an example here of an AI creature has 2 valid targets. The player would use the rule of cruel to pick whatever model has the least health, which makes sense, right? If you have a creature that's going after a bunch of cultists, they're going to pick the one that's wounded, the easy target. So each critter has stats just like your cultist. It has your strength, your dex, your defense, health, and it gives the type and damage that it does. And there's one thing that you do want to look out for. If I go to the end of everything, right here to the ghost, right? If something has a health of 00, double aught, that means it can't be killed. So if you have a ghost on the board, you can't kill it. So the best thing to do is just avoid it. So moving on to the campaign. So there's in the campaign, basically what you're going to be doing is you play an encounter, check your win conditions, injuries, you explore the forest, which gives you some random events. We'll go over that. That's another favorite thing of mine that I like. You spend your favor and you rinse and repeat until you meet the win conditions. So the win conditions, it depends on if you want to have a long game, which would be like 5 points, 5 power, or a short game would be 5 power, and a long game would be 21 power. And you gain power by running encounters. So for instance here, right, if you go for the relic hunt, you basically roll for special terrain, right? You place your forest terrain, and you also are going to add 2 relic tokens in the center of the board. And basically, in this particular scenario, you're going after those relics. And collecting the relics gives you victory points. Taking an enemy cultist out of action gets you a victory point. Taking a creature out of action gets you a victory point. So that's how you get your victory points, right? That's how you get your power. And the cult with the best end result, the most victory points, receives, in this scenario, 1 power and 100 favor. And even the loser gets 50 favor because, it's a cult and you're out there, fighting for your deity. Your deity's going to reward you, right? So that's basically kind of an overview of everything. You've got, for the campaign and everything, it's really that simple. Now, there's only 2 encounters in the core book, but like I said, the author is going to release some more content for free, at least for the plan right now is the first year, but we'll see. But right now, I'm very optimistic about trying this game out. As a matter of fact, I just created some creepy music to put behind a battle report for when I can create a battle report for the game itself. But the rest of the book here goes over injuries. So if your cultist is taken out of action, you can get injured, and up to and including getting a reward of 25 favor if you roll a 10, basically your model survives nothing, and they kind of harden and resolve themselves. Now, the exploring the forest, you basically are going to have a deck of cards, and in this particular stage, what you're going to do is you draw a card, and basically a random thing happens, right? And it goes over here in detail each suit and the different numbers and what happens. And that's the end. That's the whole game. That's it. It's plain, it's simple, it's awesome. I like the theme. I like the art here. I like the models that have been painted up in a very thematic way. I think I'm going to enjoy this game. I really do. I can't wait to give it a play. So, quite honestly, if you're a fan of horror, if you're a fan of skirmishing, I'd say go pick this game up. I want to say it was like $9 on the War Game Vault, and for $9, I mean, you can't beat it. You can't beat this at all. Their production value is there. The rules are there, and this is a work in progress. The author is he just released version 1.1 today, actually the 16th of February of 2023, and he is still working on editing it. There's more coming. Anyway, feel free to like and subscribe if you've enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.